Hello and welcome. My name is Tiffany Siders and I teach ELA here at Medlin. We are excited to bring to you an issue that is important to us as educators and as parents. We want students to gain validation and grow empathy through reading, whether books assigned for school or reading for pleasure.
Hi, I'm Gailanne Smith, and I'm the librarian here at Medlin. And like Tiffany said, this is a subject that is very, very important to both of us. We feel like books can impact students not only intellectually, but socially and emotionally as well. So today that's going to be our focus as we're talking to you about growing empathy and validation. And so we're going to begin by talking about a quote that Donalyn Miller says. Now, Donalyn Miller is an expert on this subject. She's been a classroom teacher, but also she's written 3 books on the subject. And she says, by middle school, students have an image of themselves as readers or non-readers. Students who do not read see reading as a talent that they do not have rather than as an attainable skill. In other words, by the time they get to middle school, if they are already not feeling like they're strong readers, they just don't feel like there's any point in believing they can be. And that's our goal today, is to find ways that we can work with our students to make them the readers that we would like for them to be. So I'm going to turn this over to Tiffany. She's going to give you some more information about that. And then I'll come back at the end and talk about some of the books that can help students see themselves as readers.
A lot of growing up happens in middle school, and the topics that teens are interested in and dealing with are changing each year. As teens learn more about the world, they also learn more about themselves. Reading or watching others experience the same conflicts is like getting advice from someone on how they should handle a given situation, which is why having positive examples of teens overcoming their struggles is so important. With that in mind, you would think that teens would want to read all the time to get this advice they so desperately crave. But why is the amount of reading dwindling each year? I bet you can guess before I tell you. A recent study done by commonsensemedia.org shows that teenagers are spending nearly 8 hours each day either on their phones or playing video games. While these can both relieve the stress of a hard day at school and give students something to do to keep them occupied, they can oftentimes be a distraction during school and lead to missing instructions and assignments, which brings about more stress. And these social media apps and video games rarely address the issues that teens are seeking advice on to begin with. This means that most teens are mentally exhausted from their 40-hour-a-week habit and still left with unanswered questions. I wanted to know what exactly teenagers needed to know, so I surveyed my 8th grade classes and asked what would make them reach for a book instead of video games and social media. I was surprised to find out just how many of them were still open to the idea of reading, but just hadn't found the book they wanted to read. When I asked them what topics would pull them in and change their minds about reading, the answers were overwhelmingly similar. They wanted to see characters like them, topics that real teens struggle with, learn about how others have handled the same situations they are encountering, and learn about other people and cultures. So teens are seeking to understand themselves, to find validation for their struggles in everything they do. They are just under the assumption that books don't hold the key to unlock those answers. So now more than ever, we want students to have relevant books at their fingertips. There are so many places students can sample books, hear book talks, and get recommendations for books that relate to them. So on the screen, you will see different publishing companies and their websites that are created just for teens. And then also there are these apps that are available for students to go on and listen to examples or samples of books for free. They can get library cards and check out books for free, and they can get recommendations for good books on these sites. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gailanne so she can tell you a little bit more about the books that we have available.
So we have a lot of different books in our library that deal with diversity. Our whole district as librarians this year have done what we call a diversity audit. We've looked at books that our students need to have in their hands that they can look at and find themselves in. It's often said that books are either windows or mirrors or sliding glass doors, meaning that windows so we can look outside and see others and learn from others around us, or mirrors, we see ourselves in that book. Also, books are sliding glass doors, which means we can change our view. So if our viewpoint is not what it should be, if it's not accurate, then we can read a book and find a book that connects with others and helps change us. And that's where that empathy piece comes in. So these are all different categories that books can deal with. And it's not just about diversity. Diversity is part of it. We typically think of race that way, or culture or religion, but there's also gender identity, which becomes a big topic in middle school. Diverse ability, students with physical needs and special needs. Students, though, who are dealing with other topics that sometimes they feel alone. And if they can find a book that they can connect with, it makes such a huge difference for them. They know that they're not by themselves. So books on grieving, possibly if they're adopted or if they've been in foster care, their body image. Do I weigh too much? Am I underweight? You know, how do other people see me? Do I have problems with my appearance that maybe are not really problems with my appearance, but it helps them to identify that they're not alone in those things. Abuse, sometimes it's a hard topic. And if a child doesn't feel comfortable talking to somebody about it, a book that helps them to see how a character deals with that can be a positive impact. Growing up in poverty or gender discrimination. So at the end of this presentation, if you go back to the page where you clicked on this, there are links to this slideshow as well as to a more exhaustive list of books. And it is by no means everything that deals with these topics, but we just wanted to give you a few of them. So I'm going to today do a few book talks on some of these and try not to go too long, because if you know me, when I start talking books, I have a hard time reining it in. But we are going to stick to that today and really kind of tell you about some books that deal with different topics, but I promise I'm not going to go on forever. I'm going to begin with the one up at the top on the left, Black Brother by Jewel Parker Rhodes. She is a very favorite author of middle grade kids. Wrote Ghost Boys a few years ago, Towers Falling, wonderful books dealing with a lot of really difficult issues to talk about. And in this book, there are two biracial brothers who attend the same prep school, but they have drastically different treatments. Dante has the same dark skin as his Black mother, and he is arrested for responding to bullying in a way at school that his brother Trey, who resembles his white father, never really would. And so the parents decide to file a civil rights case because of this. Dante has to decide, how does he approach his classmates who are so aggressive and so cruel to him? And he decides, instead of going down to their level, he is going to meet them on a common ground. Fencing is a big thing at his school, and so he begins working with a former Olympic fencing champion to up his game. This book deals with a lot of microaggressions, small things that people say and do that are offensive to other cultures, and you might not even realize it. So for students, this is really a mirror, a window, or a sliding glass door, depending upon their circumstances. Arush Shah in The End of Time, beside that one. Books with mythology have become really popular ever since Rick Riordan rolled out his Percy Jackson series. And authors are now branching out beyond just Greek and Roman mythology, especially if their own culture has legends and myths that they can introduce students to. So Arush Shah deals with Hindu mythology, and this book is embedded in the Indian culture. This is a whole series of books. This is the first one that you're seeing on the screen. In this book, Aru's mom is a museum curator. She works at a museum, and her classmates who pick on her and tease her all the time, she decides she's going to impress them by lighting the lamp of Bharata, unexpectedly releasing a demon set on awakening the god of destruction. Not a good idea, just to show how smart you are or how brave you are. So now, of course, she's got to save the world. But a few of her friends join in. It's fast-paced, humorous, exciting, a wonderful book that will have students devouring the whole series. When Stars Are Scattered, down there at the bottom. This is based on a true story. It's written by Victoria Jameson, who's done many graphic novels that our students love. This one is a graphic novel format, but Omar Muhammad co-wrote it with her, and it is his story. He and his younger brother Hassan lived in a refugee camp in Kenya after they were separated from their parents due to soldiers attacking their village in Somalia. At the age of 4, Omar was moving with just groups of refugees trying to find safety. And at this point in the story, he has an opportunity to go to school in his refugee camp, but it would mean leaving Hassan every day with somebody else in the camp, and he's not sure that that's the best way to be a big brother. So this deals with compassion, determination. It is a wonderful story, and as I said, based on real events. When You Trap a Tiger, this book won the 2021 Newbery Award, and it is rooted in Korean folklore. It is the story of Lily, her mom, and her sister Sam, and their grandmother is ailing. She is dying, though they don't know this at the beginning of the story. And they move in with her. They call her Halmani, and she has told them stories their whole life. Lily is convinced these stories are true. Therefore, while she's not expecting to see and talk to a tiger, when it happens, she believes the experience is real. And this tiger wants to make a deal in exchange for her grandmother's healing. But one must proceed with caution when you're making bargains with tigers. Lily considered herself a quiet Asian girl. Does she have the courage to follow through on the tiger's request? It is a wonderful story focusing on family love and understanding and the power of a good story in our lives. The last book on here is The Epic Fail of Arturo Zamora. This book cracked me up. It is so middle school. Pablo Cortaya writes this wonderful story of a Cuban-American family living in Miami. And it's a wonderful community that supports each other. And his family has a restaurant and Arturo works there. That's just kind of the way it is. It's summer. He's excited. He can't wait for this relaxing summer to begin. But two things are going to keep it from being what he dreamed. First, Carmen, his mother's goddaughter, has come to visit, and his stomach keeps getting a little fluttery every time she's around. Second, there's a flashy real estate developer who's moved into town and is buying up property to gentrify the neighborhood. Can he help save the family restaurant when everything he tries to do makes him feel foolish in front of Carmen? It's told from his clever and humorous perspective, and you will be plunged into the sights, smells, and sounds of this vibrant neighborhood in this book. So the next categories, we're going to look at books that are a little bit more about being diverse in a cultural way or with a religion. There's three on this page. Manana Land is Pam Munoz Ryan's book that she came out with last year, and it takes place in a small town located somewhere in the Americas. And 11-year-old Max has been raised by his no-nonsense father and Head in the Clouds grandfather ever since his mother disappeared when he was a baby. He longs to find her, and as he's snooping around the house, he uncovers secrets about his family's past and ends up embarking on a dangerous mission to help a refugee from a dictator-led neighboring country find her way to Manana Land. So it is not based in a definite real place. However, it could take place in many different places. And many of our students will recognize themselves or their families in the situations that go on here. The story has a lot of magic infused in it, and it reminds children that humanity thrives when people embrace differences and construct bridges instead of borders. When Dimple Met Rishi, this one is more young adult. It is a fun romance, as well as being a book that deals with girls kind of learning to stand up for themselves a little bit. Dimple and Rishi's parents have arranged their marriage. Rishi is aware of the arrangement. Dimple is not. Rishi longs for traditional marriage like his parents had, but Dimple is adamantly opposed to her parents' efforts to push her toward the same, favoring a career and education over family. So they have this a disastrous initial meeting when Dimple ends up throwing iced coffee at Rishi, but the two slowly but surely become friends and slowly but surely fall in love with each other. There is a frequent back and forth with the emotions they're both feeling, and it is fun to watch this play on first love. And for those of you who remember those feelings, you will definitely giggle and laugh your way through parts of this. But in the end, they both learn to respect and appreciate their Indian heritage and traditions, but manage to be able to go their own way when the time comes. Akinga just came out this last year. It is by Nnedi Okorafor. Sorry, I know I just probably murdered that. This is a book that takes place in Nigeria. And in this book, the chief of police was murdered by very corrupt criminals living in this town. And the main character, that's his father. And so he really wants to help out, but the murder remains unsolved. And everybody knows who's the one who caused it to happen. And he's a local crime lord known as the Chief of Chiefs. And Namadi's father appears in spirit form to him and hands him an Ikinga. It's a statue that empowers the holder to transform into a huge, incredible Hulk-like man. And so with it, he takes it upon himself to solve this crime and to take out the bad guys, if you will. But the problem is the more he does, the more rage and anger threatens to consume him, to the point where he is turned into a creature that nobody recognizes and he can't really return from. So great book on dealing with emotions, on forgiveness, friendship, and loyalty. The next two books on here are in our LGBTQIA plus category. These are books for students who are either needing to learn to be a little bit more open to others and accepting of others, or books for students who are dealing with these questions they have in their own lives. The first one, Two-Night Owl from Dogfish, is kind of like a parent trap, if you will. This book really made me laugh and giggle in places. This book takes place between two different children, New Yorker Avery Bloom and adventurous Bette Devlin. There's something very powerful connecting them, and that's that their fathers have met and fallen in love with each other. They are horrified at the prospect of becoming sisters. So their dads decide they're going to send them to a summer sleepaway camp together while they take a trip to get to know each other better. But when the dad's relationship goes bad, they're willing to do whatever it takes to get them back together because they know that that's what will make them happy. It is told entirely through emails. Parts of it are hysterical, parts of it are really moving, a wonderful book for teaching tolerance. The Best at It. This book is about a student named Rahul Kapoor, and he may not be sure about his sexuality, but he is sure of one thing. This year he wants to make an impression. So his grandfather tells him all these stories, and he decides that based on his grandfather's stories, the best way to impress his classmates and protect himself from bullies is to pick something and be the best at it. So many things he tries just go horribly, horribly wrong in a very humorous way in parts. But soon he decides to settle on mathletes and he becomes a star there. But when a classmate named Jenny asks him to the Sadie Hawkins dance and his mathlete's career doesn't go as planned, he spirals into anxious depression with symptoms of OCD that force him to confront and eventually accept who he is. This book is semi-autobiographical and it tackles many issues for students who are trying to find their identity, sometimes in a humorous way, but often in a heart-wrenching voice. The next books that we're looking at here are books that are about characters who have diverse abilities. And I'm going to shorten my descriptions of these because I'm looking at my time. And as always, I'm saying more than I really have time for, but oh my gosh, they are all such wonderful books. Dusty Bowling wrote Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus, and there's a book that follows after it. This is about Avon Green, and she loves to tell people that she lost her arms in an alligator wrestling match or a wildfire in Tanzania, but the truth is she was born without them. Her parents run a rundown amusement park called Stagecoach Pass in Arizona, and she moves there with them and has to navigate making new friends, wondering who her mom was because she's adopted, and what is the rest of her life going to look like with this disability. It is a wonderful book about facing your fears and just taking them head on. Linda Mullally Hunt wrote Fish in a Tree a few years ago. I have a student who has read this book multiple times because she identifies with it so much. It is a book about dyslexia, and it is about how that struggle can really, really make it difficult for students. The main character in this book's name is Allie. Her teacher is having a baby. She thinks she is giving her a card on congratulations. Instead, she ends up giving her a card that is a sympathy card. All of her classmates laugh at that. It makes her feel really bad. But the truth is, until this point, nobody's realized she really can't read. So with the teacher who's the substitute coming in to help out while her teacher is gone, he realizes that this is an issue and he helps her build up her courage to do something with it. A wonderful story about accepting the limitations that you may feel like you have, but working through them and deciding that even if you're dealing with some type of physical impairment or social or emotional impairment, you can overcome. You can find ways of coping. Challenger Deep is definitely more of a YA book, really wonderful, moving book. This is about Caden Bosch, and he lives in two worlds. One is his real life with his family, friends in high school. There he is paranoid for no reason, thinks people are trying to kill him, demonstrates obsessive compulsive behavior. But in his other world, he's part of a crew for a pirate captain on a voyage to the Challenger Deep, the ocean's deepest trench. There he's paranoid, wary of the temperamental captain and his mutinous parrot, and he tries hard to interpret the mutterings of his fellow shipmates as they sail through uncharted waters toward unknown dangers. Slowly, his fantasy and paranoia begin to take over until his parents have only one choice left, and that's to commit him to Seaside Hospital Psychiatric Unit, where he's diagnosed with schizophrenia. It is a wonderful, wonderful, moving novel that is drawn on the experiences of the author's own son, Brennan, who is the illustrator of this haunting and unforgettable novel and lived much of this himself. So the author puts his son here in the forefront with this book, and it is one that you will never forget. These are some other titles that students might find themselves in. Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. You know, middle school's daunting, even under the best of conditions, but if you're like Rex and you're also dealing with a father who abandoned you, a mother and a boyfriend who abuse you, food and housing insecurity, and the stigma of free lunch, it can be overwhelming. This is a memoir, and the author writes about his first semester of 6th grade. His grade school friends desert him for football. He's poor and Hispanic, so there are teachers who prejudge him. One of the worst things, though, is there's a deaf lunch lady who never remembers his name, and every single day forces him basically to loudly announce that he's on free lunch. But eventually he meets some other students who introduce him to the world of true friendship and comics. And it opens a window into us being able to see that poverty can lead to problems like domestic violence and feelings of unworthiness. And so students who are suffering and dealing with those issues can really see themselves in this book. It can be a little disturbing to read this book, but for other students, they're going to recognize themselves in this. Maybe he just likes you as another book that is really difficult subject-wise to deal with, but it's a book that needs to be there. If there are students who are, we know there are students, not even an if, who are dealing with abuse and dealing with feeling like they are not safe at home or at school. And this book tackles that head on, but we've got students who need to be able to see themselves in this book. In this case, you have a girl named Mila, and she wears this fuzzy green sweater to school. And what starts off with some boys demanding hugs when she wears that so soft sweater turns into uncomfortable touching. And she really does not know how to deal with this, even after she talks to friends about it and talks to teachers about it. She gets a variety of different responses. Some of them tell her that all of this is just flirting, and some tell her that it's just a game for the boys. But the problem is they deny that there's anything going on there. Her mother's dealing with so many different issues of her own that she doesn't know how she can even go to her mom about it. But finally, a friend tells her, this is not okay, and this is not something you should deal with. And you need to bring it up to a trusted adult, and you need to talk about it. So for anybody who is dealing with this issue, or a student who is on the other side of it causing these problems, this is a book that is extremely relevant. Starfish by Lisa Phipps is the last one on here. This book is recently come out. It is about Ellie. And in 5th grade at her birthday party, she had a literal big splash. She jumps into the pool in her whale swimsuit, and from that point on has been ostracized because of her weight. She has decided to make a book of fat girl rules, like no making waves and avoid eating in public. Don't move so fast that your body jiggles. Her safe place is a swimming pool, because there she can just float weightless and be able to stretch herself out like a starfish, take up all the room she wants. And it doesn't help because her mom is constantly posting articles about losing weight and about how much that would make her feel better, when all of those articles just make her feel worse. But her dad is her ally. He takes her to see a therapist, and there's a new neighbor named Catalina who loves Ellie for who she is. And with all the support being able to build her up, she's finally able to cast aside her fat girl rules and starfish in real life and be her own fabulous self. It is a wonderful book, but it is heart-wrenching in parts. So all of these are books that students who find themselves in similar situations or just want to know what it would feel like and be able to empathize well might want to check out. There is this complete list back, like I said, on the original click that you use to get to this slideshow, and you can see the slideshow and a more thorough list there. So we really appreciate that you joined us today, and appreciate that you were able to be a part of this, and hopefully you learned from it. Anytime you've got any questions about library, you are more than welcome to reach out to me about any books or book suggestions, and I'm more than happy to help you. And I know that Ms. Siders feels the same way, don't you?
Yes, I do. I am happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.